Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez. Let's start out with opening thoughts. What do you think about this fight, PC?
I love the fight, first off. So kudos to both Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson for taking this fight. I think that's something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, is that guys got to be willing to fight one another. This one actually came together relatively easy from a fan standpoint. We didn't see a whole lot of banner between them on social media and things like that. It kind of got talked about. They talked a little bit of shit on social media, and next thing you know, the fight was a done deal. So I'm excited for this fight. It sucks we got to get 31 days into the year before we get a big card, but it's here, man. We're a few days away, and I'm ready for it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And that's a good point. Right now, boxing is in a very weird space. I was saying earlier, a lot of people thought or wanted to see this type of fight a little earlier. That kind of segues into what I would like to touch on, and that's the resumes of these two fighters. Similar age, both of these guys have been around for a minute. But when you look at the resumes, there's a sharp contrast in the resume of Teofimo Lopez versus that of Shakur Stevenson. What are your thoughts on the resume of Shakur Stevenson, which I think personally is a little thin, but we'll delve into that a little more. What's your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I think I think they're both 28 years old. Obviously, Teofimo has the better resume, given that he's, unified against Lomo and fought the undefeated Josh Taylor. He fought Richard Comey when he was 21, 22 years old. So when Teo was 21, 22. Comey was a little longer in the tooth, but he still offered something. Shakur, on the other hand, I'm not sure if his resume is thin as much as he just hasn't faced as many styles as Teo. And I think that will make Teo a little more adaptable in the actual during the actual fight. Shakur's kind of fought, I guess you would consider them 1-2 guys, not a whole lot of salt and pepper guys that could do a bunch of different things. The Valdez win was great. I thought the Nakatani win was great. Obviously, what he was able to do with an undefeated, my man he fought last, I'm drawing a blank, William Zepeda, who was undefeated, I think 32-0. So he has great fights on his resume. I just don't think he's fought a lot of different styles. If you look at some of those guys I just named, they kind of come forward 1-2 guys to where you fight a Loma, that's a different style. You fight a Comey, that's a different style. Josh Taylor, a tall southpaw, big for the division. He's just seen more. So in terms of resume, not saying they're equal, because I do think Teo's resume is better, but I think the benefit comes from him just seeing multiple styles.
Yeah, and we always see things like that manifest in a lot of fights. But the interesting thing here is that although Teo has the experience, and I think he's actually a little more skilled than people give him credit for as a result of seeing and facing all those different styles. But I think we could agree as well that Shakur actually is the more skilled fighter. How do you see that balancing out, where the more skilled fighter is coming in against a guy with more experience and is seeing more skills? Do the skills themselves last and actually stand the test of time in this fight? Or, do you think that the experience itself with all the different styles Teo has faced, do you think that gives him the edge? How do you see that playing out?
I think that's what makes this such a pick'em fight, V, because if you look at it, I look at it as skills, Shakur, versus athleticism, Teo. But then I swing the pendulum a little bit in boxing IQ and ring IQ to Shakur, but then the experience and resume goes to Teo. That's what makes great 50-50 fights. I think if it plays out in the fans' favor, I think we'll see all that come to a head in the ring in terms of Shakur's boxing IQ and skills against Teo's experience and athleticism. I don't think Teo's going to allow Shakur to do some of the things he was able to do in other fights, which people perceive him as boring. Not me, because I can appreciate skillful boxing, but the overall masses viewed it as boring. I think Teo eliminates some of that with his athleticism, with his experience. I think he can make Shakur fight maybe when Shakur's not wanting to fight. I'm not saying Shakur takes rounds off, but Shakur's a jogger. He paces himself. Teo's a sprinter. And we know with, joggers and sprinters, that jogger will let you lap him 2, 3, 4 times but you probably get to the finish line a little bit behind that jogger. Shakur is one of the best joggers in boxing. So can Teo offset that with his experience and athleticism? That's what we'll get answered Saturday, because Shakur's ring IQ is next level. His distance is next level. I just haven't seen it against a guy like Teo, and that's what we're going to find out.
So when you say a guy like Teo, one thing that you and I have talked about offline a lot, and I think will be interesting to introduce to this conversation, is the fact that sometimes you don't really know which Teo you're going to get. The irony there is that, the irony there is that I think in his biggest matches, Lomachenko, some of the other ones, we've seen the best of Teo. But then you have the Kambosos fight and some of the other ones where good fights, but I don't know that they got him up, and he didn't appear to get his up form. He didn't look as good. With a fight of this magnitude, do you think we see the best version of Teo? I mean, it sounds crazy, but again, we've seen variations of him. Sometimes he wasn't. Do you think Shakur brings out the absolute best we've ever seen in Teo?
Absolutely. And if it doesn't, hate to say this, but maybe it's time for Teo to find something else to do, because me personally, I feel like Teo is being very disrespected. It's in Brooklyn, supposedly his backyard. He's the champion, but yet he's the underdog. It's just so many things where it just feels a little disrespectful towards Teo. That being said, he is very inconsistent. I did an interview with Breadman, one of the best boxing minds in the game, and he talked about Teo's inconsistencies. So here's the catch-22 with his inconsistency. Steve Claggett, he looked terrible. Kambosos, I thought he showed a lot of heart because he got dropped early. Yeah. He fought his way back and lost a majority decision, and it was looking really bad for him. So I don't – it's weird that he lost to Kambosos, but I do think he showed a lot of things. Sandor Martin, that's the fight he asked, do I still have it? Because he just didn't look great. Got knocked down in that fight. I thought Martin should have got credited with 2 knockdowns. Just those type of fights. I thought Barbosa, he looked good, not great, but the card was so terrible. I thought it made us put his performance up there. But then you look at Josh Taylor and you look at Lomachenko, 2 great fighters, and he beat them decisively, and they were southpaws. So if you're playing that game, Shakur is a southpaw. He's actually right-handed, but he fights southpaw. His 2 best performances were against southpaws. The inconsistency scared me simply because he just didn't show any of the athleticism and talent that he has. I don't think that'll be the case for this fight. He has to feel a little bit slighted being the champion, coming in as an underdog. And this is Shakur's first fight at 140. So that makes it even more crazy.
That's an interesting subplot. Not as many people are talking about as I would think, but I think the irony with that is, Shakur coming up in weight, he said he'll feel more hydrated, yada, yada. When fighters go up, we see that they don't have to diet and boil down as much. But we go back to the punching power with both of these guys. It's a little deceptive. Teo in particular has seemed like a pretty big puncher at times, but you look at the resume, I mean, what is it, 13? I want to say 13 KOs in 23 fights. Shakur, similar, 24 fights and only 11 KOs. I mean, what do you think? Because actually, let me back up for a second. In that last fight with Cepeda, I thought that Shakur showed me more power than I thought he had against a guy with a pretty good set of whiskers. So, do you think that Teo could be impacted in any way by the power of Shakur, or what some perceive as a lack of power? How do you think that whole thing plays out?
Well, I saw Keyshawn Davis, who is Shakur's buddy, obviously came out and said it can be a Devin Haney, Brian Norman Jr. moment where the guy who's not perceived as the puncher can put the guy that's perceived as the, if not puncher, the more electric fighter in Teofimo. I personally don't see that happening because I look at Devin Haney's physique and you think once he fights in a weight class where he's not sucking himself dry, he'll probably have a little more punching power. I don't view Shakur as a guy that's going to move up 5 pounds and get a lot of punching power, but I do think Teo's punching power is a little overstated because if you look at his fights at 140, honestly, Shakur has knockouts against Yoshina in 23, and he knocked out Josh Padley, who I knew took the fight on late notice because of Floyd Schofield pulling out in 25. To get Teo's last knockout, you got to go back to Pedro Campo in 2022. He's had 5 decisions in a row. Teofimo Lopez, I'm talking about, to where Shakur at least has a stoppage in 23 and 25. You would have to go back to 22 for Teofimo. So that could be a little bit, you got to kind of play with that a little bit. But I do think the more wow factor guy is Teofimo Lopez, the more explosive guy is Teofimo Lopez. If a judge hasn't filled out his card and you're coming into the stretch of a round, I just feel like Teo can do that wow thing to make them write 10-9 in his favor. But that being said, Shakur does what he does so well for 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes every round. Can Teo depend on those explosive moments? So in other words, if Shakur's boxed his ears off 2 minutes and 30 seconds, can he depend on 30 minutes of explosiveness to sway the judges? That's a tricky game to play.
That's a very tricky game because, and that goes back again to the skill level of Shakur, where he's not going to give you too many opportunities to land at all. So yeah, you really can't wait for that last minute, 30 seconds, 45 seconds of the round to try to put that exclamation point. You really need to do it in between the other moments of the round, and that's really hard to do against somebody like Shakur. But let's pivot on that real quickly, and let's talk about the body work. One thing that I think is underrated with Teofimo Lopez, I've always loved his dedication to the rib shack. When he goes to the body, he can do damage. Definitely. Do you think if you're training, let me put you in training mode for a second. If you're training Teofimo, do you employ him to go and smother Lopez where he can't get his shots off and you have access to that body? Do you get him to stay on the outside? What type of strategy do you think it would take for Teo to be successful in this fight and to be able to land to that body? Because it won't be easy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we got to see old Teo. And old Teo not only was explosive and athletic, but he was creative. If you look at some of his older fights, especially at 35, some of the things he did against Lomo and Richard Comey, he broke down the right hand he landed on Comey, I saw the other day. He was a very creative fighter. I think he got away from that a little bit when he lost to Cambosis. And I think a little self-doubt crept in his mind a little bit. But if he can go back to being creative, Shakur takes a half step back. When he takes that half step back, you take a half step forward. We haven't seen a whole lot of people go to Shakur's body. Admittedly, though, Shakur said Oscar Valdez hit him with a hard body shot, and he told us Coney felt like he had to throw up. Never understood why anybody after that didn't go to his body.
I remember that shot. I remember that shot, and I remember him visibly shaken from that shot. So I wasn't thinking about that, but I have felt for some time like Shakur can be affected mostly by the body work. And that was one of the thoughts behind me asking that question.
Yeah, because Shakur pulls his head back well. His upper torso movement is great, but his feet kind of stay cemented if you can corner him. I thought Zepeda had numerous opportunities to bang to the body, but you're talking, again, a limited guy that's a headhunter, so I understood him not doing it. Teo, a little more creative, a little more athletic, can get in and out better. I think there will be opportunities there to kind of bump on the body. And Teo's kind of alluded and hinted at, making it a little rough, making the referee separate him. I think that plays into his favor if he can actually execute that. But you're in there with the master. You're in there with a chess player, and it's going to be more difficult to do it than say it.
Okay, so you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I got to ask, if we see a stoppage in this fight, who would you say is coming from? Who's stopping who if we are somehow fortunate enough or maybe unfortunate enough to see an actual stoppage? Who do you think has the leverage there?
Man, it's crazy because the way Teo leaps in and jumps in and out, you would think Shakur could catch him with something. I just haven't seen enough power from Shakur to think he can pull that off. I think if there's some kind of weird stoppage, I could see Teo flustering Shakur a little bit. I mean, I'm talking this is a far-fetched because, like you said, Shakur just don't give you many opportunities. But if I'm just predicting a knockout, I would think it would be Teo, the bigger guy. And I say the bigger guy. Physically, Shakur is the bigger guy if you see them stand next to each other.
Yes,
Weight class wise and where they've been fighting at, Tio, the bigger guy, I can see him possibly overwhelming Shakur, especially if Shakur played the ropes like he did against Cepeda. I don't think that'd be the strategy because he has someone different in front of him. But I didn't like him laboring on the ropes as much as he did against Cepeda.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an excellent point right there, man. It's so many different angles you can look at this fight from. I think clearly, like we've said, Shakur, you have to look at him with the skills, but it's just so many different things Teofimo can do to disrupt what he can do. And I do believe if Teo can use his strength, because I do think he's the stronger fighter, regardless of who's bigger, not bigger, whatever. I do think he's the more naturally strong fighter. I think that if he can get in, smother him a lot, keep that distance, just stay out of his way and not give him the distance to pick him apart all night. But if he stays in his chest and plays that game, I think it's a really long night for Shakur, which is crazy because his skills are what they are. But, to wrap it all up, Percy, I don't want to put you on the spot. We always like to do our predictions. If you had to call it right now, based on everything everything we've seen, how do you think it ends?
So this is going to be crazy, V. I don't know why, but I've had this feeling since early in the week. I told a few people this. This fight ends in a draw. I got Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson ending in a draw. I think it's going to be, either way, I think it'll be controversial. And there's several different ways I played this fight out in my mind. I see some type of majority draw. I really do, man. I think judges are getting more comfortable. Poor Lamont Roach is the recipient of most of them, but I think they're getting more comfortable scoring fights a draw. And this just has draw feeling to me. It's such an evenly matched. I just see it being a draw. I see it being some kind of majority draw. Who gets the judge's nod? Probably Shakur on a card, and then he'll be outweighed by two judges who have it a draw. So I'm betting the draw. So I think it's going to end in a draw. I think it's going to be one of those fights where we may finally, because Lamont Roach still haven't gotten a rematch, get two fights from a big fight like this. And I think it's because it ends close and tied.
Interesting, man. Of all the different outcomes I've had in my mind, a draw was not one of them. I could see, as I touched on earlier, I could see a situation where Shakur just, I'm talking 9-3, 9. If I could really see something like that, the guy's just very hard to hit. And, sometimes with Tio, I think if his confidence starts to wane early and you got a guy that's masterful at the way he picks you off, hit, not get hit, that can frustrate the hell out of people. We saw that during Floyd's whole era. So I thought about it that way. I'm also stuck on the fact that Tio is one of them fighters. When he's coming with something to prove, he's coming with something to prove, and he can make it muggy. He can, you know what I'm saying? So this is a real tough one for me to call. I honestly don't have a prediction right now. If I'm a betting man, I think I'm going Shakur on points because I just think no matter what happens, unless it's a really closely contested fight where these guys are in each other's chest, I just think the cleaner shots with the reach. By the way, I don't know the reach difference between them. I got to look that up. But the cleaner shots, I think, will come from Shakur. And I think that will be his path to a very close victory if I had to drop a prediction. But that's my thoughts, man. I guess we'll see.
That's what these kind of fights supposed to do. It's supposed to get us thinking and talking. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of parity and distance between them. So that's a great thing for fight fans, man. That's all I'm going to predict.
That's true, man. That's true. While we're at it, before we wrap this up, what do we have on the schedule after this? There's really not, and this is something I'm not very happy about. The sport doesn't give us a whole lot right now. What else we have on the docket? Anything else?
The only thing to note is Ryan Garcia, Mario Barrios. That's a done deal. And look, this card, I don't even want to get away from this card, V. I think the fight of the night, co-main event, Carlos Adames against Ammo Williams. That's probably going to be the fight of the night. Alina Adames. Keyshawn Davis, Jermaine Ortiz. Keyshawn can fight his ass off, but Keyshawn's talking about everybody but Jermaine Ortiz. That can be dangerous. So those are two fights to look out for. I know Shushu Carrigan's on the card, so this is a great card. The Ryan Garcia and Mario Barrios card is looking really, really good. They got Richard Hitchens sitting on there. They have Gary Antoine Russell's on that card. So that card's coming together. I think that's early March, if I'm not mistaken. Looked like Keith Thurman and Fundora is going to circle back to their fight that Fundora had to pull out of with a hand injury, I think, in April. So slowly but surely seeing things on the calendar, but I'm with you, man. I mean, we're a month in and there's no announcements, and this is a sport that has 2 months of promo. So,
wow. Yeah, that's tough. You know, I want to go back real quickly before we wrap it up to that Keyshawn Ortiz fight. Let me tell you, man, that's one that I think we could get a surprise, you know, and this isn't a knock on Keyshawn. Keyshawn's skills are what they are. But you mentioned something that I want to piggyback on, the fact that he's kind of looking at everything but the man in front of him. And I think this, for me, has been Keyshawn's problem, not just with this episode, but I mean, I think he's had a bit of that, you know, where he's kind of focused in places he shouldn't be focused. You know, it hasn't worked against him in the past, but this is a fighter that he'll be in there with Saturday night that I think could actually flip that on him. And, you know, we'll see. But if you had to put that into words before we shut it down, do you think Ortiz has a shot to upset him?
Yeah, absolutely. If we get Jermaine Ortiz that fought Lomachenko and not Jermaine Ortiz that kind of ran against Teofimo Lopez, it could be a very scary night for Keyshawn Davis. He is Jermaine Ortiz is a depends on what guy shows up kind of guy, but Keyshawn has a lot going on, and it always seems like he has a lot going on. He came out and admitted that, you know, the fight he blew weight in, I think it was Edwin De Los Santos, that he was drinking in camp every day, and you know, he fired Bomac in that squad, so he's out of the Crawford camp, and he brought, I think, an old trainer in, and he's always talking mental health things, and you know, just a lot going on always. The Namir Albright guy, him and his brothers jumped at the fight that he missed weight. It's always a bunch of shit with him. Jermaine Ortiz isn't the type of guy you can overlook like that. So yeah, this is a big moment for Keyshawn Davis, because honestly, he can't have many more hiccups, man. He's had a lot of turmoil in his career.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, you know, I kind of didn't want to get into that, and I stayed away from it. But I mean, the reason you brought it up is because, to be honest, it's in the back of all of our heads. That was when people started to really realize what a mess some elements of his career has been. And it's crazy because he's an incredibly talented fighter, you know, but you see all these different little issues, and you know, it's not nearly as bad, but it almost reminds me of the scenario with Tank, where you have this incredibly talented fighter, but everything around them kind of prevents you from seeing them kind of get where they should be or could be, perhaps. But it's going to be interesting to see unfold, man. Before we wrap it up, though, want to put anything out there, any last thoughts or anything for the listeners?
No, man, just everybody tune in. Boxing can use the views. We finally getting a big one. This is a very big fight. I don't know why it's not being promoted as that. Seems a little lackluster this week in promotion, but this is going to be a good fight. I don't think it's going to be a fire fight, but if you love technical boxing, these are two chess players, and this is going to be one of those type fights.
No doubt, man. Well put right there. I don't even really have anything to add, man. Everybody out there, thank you for checking us out here at the VIP crew. We got a few more things coming this week as we break down this fight. Probably get a couple fighters, a couple other guys in to chime in with us and break this thing down. And if not before, definitely in the aftermath. But on that note, as we always say, peace, God bless, one love, y'all. Take care. Good night.